Ryan Voss had never once, in 35 years of living, trusted a person more than he trusted good data. People got tired. People played politics. People could smile at you in a meeting and still let a bad number slide by, because the truth was inconvenient and the quarter was almost over. Numbers did not do that. Numbers held still until you understood them. Then they told you exactly what they meant, with no apology and no agenda. This was how Ryan's mind worked, and it was the only thing keeping him upright at 11 o'clock on a cold Tuesday night in October, alone in the validation lab at Continental Harvest Foods. The lab was cold the way food plants are always cold. It had nothing to do with the weather outside. It had everything to do with keeping the place clean. Ryan sat with his arms braced on either side of his laptop, reading the same heat report for the third time. His finger tapped once against the edge of the desk. It was a small motion, but it was the only outward sign that something underneath him had started to slip. The F0 number on batch WC 2214 was low. Not a disaster. Just low enough that a careless reviewer might round it up and move on. Ryan was not a careless reviewer. He closed his laptop, rubbed his eyes, and told himself he would look again in the morning with fresh eyes. Some part of him already knew the morning would not change what the numbers were telling him. He had worked at Continental Harvest for 9 years, the last 3 as senior principal engineer for process validation. In plain terms, that meant nothing left the Willow Creek plant without his signature on the safety file. He held a PhD in food engineering from Purdue. He ate lunch alone most days, with a spreadsheet open. People in the building called him the most stubborn set of eyes on the floor, and they meant it as both a compliment and a complaint. His boss and mentor, Gregory Halden, VP of Operations, liked to introduce him as the conscience of the plant, whether the plant wants one or not. Ryan was tall, an inch or 2 over 6 feet, with the kind of lean build that came from actual work rather than a gym. He carried himself straight and upright, shoulders squared, the posture of a man who never slouched, even after long hours on his feet checking equipment on the plant floor. His hair was dark brown, cut short, with the first threads of gray starting to show at his temples. He had a plain, serious face, the kind that looked stern in photographs and only softened once he actually spoke to you. His eyes were a pale, gray-blue, calm, and unhurried. The eyes of a man used to staring at the same number for a long time before deciding what it meant. A faint line sat permanently between his eyebrows, worn there by years of frowning at data instead of people. He wore his shirt sleeves rolled up even in the cold, and his hands, when he wasn't holding a pen, tended to go very still, a habit that looked calm to strangers and looked like tight control to the few people who knew him well. Ryan was, at that moment, being quietly considered for a new role, Director of Product Safety and Process Engineering. Nobody had announced it yet, but he could feel it coming, the way you can feel rain coming before it falls, because Gregory had already started introducing him to visitors using the title before it existed. 3 weeks earlier, Ryan had met Claire Ashworth without knowing who she was. It happened at a small coffee shop 2 blocks from the plant, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu that never changed. Ryan came in every morning at 7 for black coffee and a bagel he rarely finished. That Thursday, the only open seat was at a shared table, across from a woman in a gray wool coat marking up a printed report with a pen, as if she meant to argue with it. "Is this seat taken?" Ryan asked. She looked up. She had sharp eyes, the kind that studied you before they welcomed you. She looked to be in her early 30s, with dark red hair pulled back in a loose knot, a few strands already falling near her temple. She had a lovely, graceful face, delicate and softly pretty, with high cheekbones and a mouth that always looked ready to ask a hard question. The kind of face that made people underestimate how sharp she was, right up until she opened it. She was not tall, but she sat so straight that she seemed taller than she was. Her coat was plain and practical, the coat of someone who dressed for long days on a plant floor, not for being looked at. "No, please," she said. He sat down. For a while, neither of them spoke, which suited Ryan fine. Then she reached for her coffee, and he noticed, almost without meaning to, the way she held the cup. 2 hands, steady, careful, like someone who had learned what happens when you're not careful. "You're marking that up like it insulted you," Ryan said, nodding at her paper. She glanced at him, and a small laugh escaped her. "It might have. It's a supplier report. Someone wrote, 'Minor issue, no action needed about a temperature log that's missing 4 hours of data.'" Ryan's mouth twitched. It was the closest he came, most mornings, to a smile. 4 hours is not minor. "No," she agreed. "It is not." They talked for 11 minutes. Both of them later knew the exact number, though neither said it out loud. She did not tell him her name. He did not ask where she worked. It was a small, simple pleasure, the kind you don't look at too closely, in case looking makes it stop. The next morning, Ryan walked into the Willow Creek conference room for a scheduled audit meeting and found the same woman already seated at the head of the table, laptop open, a folder of Continental Harvest safety records in front of her. "Dr. Voss," she said, standing to shake his hand. Her face had changed completely from the coffee shop. Now it was careful, professional, hard to read. "Claire Ashworth. I'll be running the independent food safety audit this quarter." Ryan shook her hand. His own face didn't change, though something behind it moved fast. "We met yesterday." "We did," Claire said. "I didn't think it was worth mentioning." "It might matter," Ryan said, "depending on what you find." Looking back, it was the first honest thing either of them said to the other at work. It set the tone for everything that came after. The audit went on for the next 2 weeks, the way a slow argument goes on between two people who respect each other too much to raise their voices. Claire questioned everything, every assumption behind every study, every gap in a record, every place where Ryan's team had, in her words, trusted the process instead of testing it. Ryan had never enjoyed being questioned. To his own surprise, he found that he enjoyed this. Their sharpest disagreement was about a new low-sodium sauce line. Claire sat across from him in a small meeting room, a printed spec sheet between them, her finger tapping the page. "Your safety margin here is thin, Ryan. You cut the sodium by 40%, and you're counting on the cooking process alone to keep the product safe. If your assumptions about the sauce are off, even a little, you don't have a safety margin. You have a hope. The cooking process is validated to kill the spores that cause botulism," Ryan said. "That's not hope. That's the whole science of thermal processing." "It's validated for the old formula," Claire said. "You change the thickness of the sauce when you cut the sodium. A thicker sauce heats up more slowly at its center. Did anyone retest how long it takes heat to reach the middle of the pouch with the new formula? Or did everyone just assume the old test still applied?" Ryan opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. He did not, in fact, know the answer. Lying to Claire Ashworth was already starting to feel worse than admitting he didn't know something. "I don't know," he said. "I'll find out." Something shifted in Claire's face, not victory, but something quieter, closer to respect. "That's the first time in 2 weeks anyone in this building has said that to me without flinching." "I don't flinch at not knowing things," Ryan said. "I flinch at not finding out." Claire looked at him for a long moment. For the first time since the coffee shop, something warm crossed her guarded face. "Good," she said. "That's rarer than you'd think." He walked her to her car that evening, without either of them planning it. The October air had gone sharp and clean, cold enough to see your breath. They stood by her car, talking about small, ordinary things, and Ryan noticed, with the same quiet attention he gave to a set of data, that he did not want the conversation to end. The problem Ryan had been circling in the lab that Tuesday night turned out to be exactly what Claire's questions had pointed toward. When his team reran the heat test on the new sauce, the time it took heat to reach the center of the pouch was longer than the old test had assumed. 3 early batches had gone through the retort using settings built for the old formula, not the new one. The F0 number, a measure of total heat delivered, the entire promise that a pouch would not, months later, cause someone to get sick, fell short of the required safety margin on those batches. Not by a huge amount, but short. Ryan called Claire before he called Gregory. It was 10 at night. He told himself it was because she already understood the numbers and could check his thinking before he took it further. That was true. It wasn't the whole reason. They met in the plant parking lot, both still in their work clothes, breath fogging in the cold. Ryan spread the printout on the hood of his car under the orange parking light, and Claire read it twice in silence. "You're right," she said finally. "This isn't safe to defend. Not at these numbers." "I know," Ryan said. He didn't feel relieved to be right. He felt something closer to dread, because being right meant the next conversation, the one with Gregory, could no longer be avoided. Claire studied him. "You look like a man about to do something he doesn't want to do. I have to hold the batches. All of them, until we retest the whole process for the new formula. That blows the launch date." "I know that too." She was quiet for a moment. "Why are you telling me this before you tell your boss?" Ryan could have said something easy, something about procedure. He didn't. "Because right now I trust your read on this more than I trust my own. And because," he added more quietly, "I wanted to tell someone who wouldn't try to talk me out of it." Claire's face softened in a way Ryan hadn't seen from her before. Not the guarded look from the audit room, not the quick wit from the coffee shop, but something plainer and more open. "I wouldn't," she said. "Not on this." They stood there longer than the conversation needed, neither one in a hurry to leave, until the cold finally won and sent them both back to their cars. Claire did not go straight home. She drove to a nearly empty parking garage near her apartment and sat with the engine off, watching her own breath fog the windshield, trying to understand what had happened to her over the last 3 weeks. She had built her whole career on one simple rule. Don't trust the story, trust the record. She had learned to be careful around men who spoke smoothly, because smoothness so often turned out to be armor for something underneath. Ryan Voss did not have that armor. He said, "I don't know," out loud, in front of people, without it seeming to cost him anything. Underneath the flat calm he brought to a meeting, she had started to notice something else. The way his voice dropped when he was actually worried instead of just performing calm, a gentleness in the way he corrected her, and an even rarer gentleness in the way he let her correct him back. She thought about the thing he'd said in the parking lot, quiet and a little embarrassed, about wanting to tell someone who wouldn't talk him out of doing the right thing. She hadn't been able to stop thinking about it since. "This is a problem," she said out loud, to no one, in the empty car. It was a problem precisely because it wasn't really a problem at all. No rule broken, no client relationship crossed. What bothered her was smaller than a rule, and, in its own way, more serious. She had started wanting him to be right, not only because the numbers said so, but because some part of her was rooting for him as a person. She decided, sitting there in the dark, that the only honest way through it was the method she used for everything else. Keep checking her own math and watch herself as carefully as she watched any client. It had not occurred to her yet that watching a feeling this closely was already its own kind of falling. Gregory Halden's office had a corner view of the Chicago skyline and a photo of himself shaking hands with the company's outgoing CEO. Gregory was in his late 50s, silver-haired and carefully groomed, with the comfortable build of a man used to expensive suits and better rooms than most people ever enter. He had spent 30 years learning how to be the most senior person in almost any conversation, and it showed in the unhurried way he moved, in the way he let silence sit a beat too long, a small trick for making the other person feel they should be the one to fill it. He listened to Ryan's summary with his arms folded and his jaw set. When Ryan finished, Gregory didn't look at the data. He looked at Ryan. "You're telling me you want to hold the entire WC, 22-14 run weeks before launch. I'm telling you the F0 numbers on the early batches don't meet the safety target for the new formula, Ryan said. That's not a preference. That's what my job requires me to say. The batches passed random lab testing. No positive results. No positive result in a small sample doesn't prove there's no risk, Gregory. You know that. Botulism risk isn't something you catch by testing after the fact. It's something you prevent by designing the process correctly before the fact. That's the entire point of a validated process. Gregory let out a long breath through his nose. The launch is tied to numbers we already gave the board this quarter. Marketing has already booked shelf space. If we pull this now, it's not a delay, Ryan. It's a story that makes people ask what else might be wrong here. And if we don't pull it, Ryan said, and something goes wrong in someone's kitchen in February, the story is much worse. And it has a name and a face attached to it. Not yours. Not mine. Gregory's eyes flicked just once toward the window instead of toward Ryan. A small, involuntary retreat that told Ryan more than anything Gregory said out loud. I need you to reconsider how you're reading this margin, Gregory said finally. At this level, it's arguable. It's not arguable. It's below the target. I could write you a memo that makes it sound arguable, if that's what you're asking me to do. But I won't put my name on it, because it wouldn't be true. The silence that followed lasted long enough that Ryan heard the building's air system click on. Gregory finally looked back at him, and something in his face had gone cold in a way Ryan had never seen from his mentor. Think carefully about how this quarter ends for you, Ryan. There's a role opening up. It would be a shame if the best person for it made himself unavailable. Ryan felt the words land somewhere under his ribs, sharp and exact, right where Gregory had aimed them. He kept his hands still in his lap, though it cost him something. I have thought about it, he said. That's why I'm here, instead of pretending I never saw the number. He left the office without raising his voice, which was for Ryan its own kind of controlled anger, jaw tight the whole elevator ride down, a pen gripped so hard in his coat pocket that he later found a mark pressed into his palm. For the next several days, Ryan felt the particular loneliness of a man who is told the truth in a room built to reward something else. People who used to stop by his office found reasons not to. Nothing was ever said out loud. Everything was said through absence. Claire noticed before he said a word about it. By then, they had fallen into the habit of eating lunch together most days, something that had started as convenience and had, without either of them deciding it out loud, become something they both looked forward to. You've gone quiet, she said, over a shared plate of fries in the plant cafeteria. Quieter than usual, and your usual is already a study in self-control. Gregory made it clear this isn't going to be forgotten quickly. Meaning the director job I was supposed to have locked up is apparently an open question now. Claire set down her fork. Ryan, I need you to actually hear this because I don't think you're saying it to yourself. What you did in that meeting wasn't reckless. It was exactly what your job is supposed to do. If Continental Harvest punishes you for it, that tells you something true about the company. It tells you nothing about whether you were right. I know that with my head, Ryan said. It's landing somewhere else. That's called having a nervous system, Claire said, and something in her voice, dry and kind at once, pulled the first real laugh out of him in days. But the conversation that mattered more came a few days later, and it was not kind at all. Claire's own firm had started getting calls. Nothing so crude as a threat, just a Continental Harvest buyer mentioning, almost in passing, that the company was reviewing its list of audit partners for next year, and that reports which were overly cautious compared to the actual risk tended to create friction for future work. Claire told Ryan this in the parking lot one evening, arms crossed against the cold, her voice flat in the way people go flat when they're furious and refuse to show it. They're leaning on my firm, she said, not on me directly. That would be too obvious. They're leaning on the partners who decide whether I get put on the next contract. Claire, let me finish. Her jaw was tight, her eyes fixed somewhere past his shoulder. You asked me, right at the start of this, to trust the data over the politics. I did. I kept doing it. And now I'm looking at a report that has to say, in writing, that this launch should be held. And I'm looking at what that costs me. And I need to ask you something, and I need you to actually answer it instead of being careful with me. Ask. Are you asking me to back you because the data actually supports it? Or because you want me standing next to you when this gets ugly? Her voice cracked just slightly on the last few words, the only crack in an otherwise steady sentence. Because I need those to be different reasons, Ryan. I need to know I'm doing this because it's true, not because of what's grown between us these last few weeks. Ryan understood, with a clarity that felt almost cold, that this was the most important question anyone had asked him through this whole ordeal, and that answering it carelessly would cost him something he had only recently realized he did not want to lose. I would never ask you to fake a finding from me, he said slowly. Not for the promotion, not for Gregory, and not for you either, if you were the one asking me to look away from something. If your numbers led somewhere else, I would want to know that more than I'd want you standing next to me. That's not a nice thing to say. It's just true. He paused. But I won't pretend I don't want you standing next to me anyway, once the finding is honest. Both things live in me at the same time. I don't know how to make it simpler than that. Claire studied him for a long moment, the anger in her shoulders slowly loosening, not disappearing, but settling into something more tired and more human. That's the answer I needed, she said finally. Not the easy one, the true one. They didn't touch each other that night, but something had been tested and it had held, and both of them felt it, the way you feel a structure settle into place after weight is put on it, and it does not crack. Claire went home that night and took her own analysis apart from scratch, alone, deliberately not calling Ryan, not wanting him anywhere near her conclusion. She reran the safety calculations herself, separate from his team's numbers, using the raw temperature records and her own model of how the pouch heated. It took her past midnight. At the end of it, she arrived, on her own, with no help, at the same conclusion Ryan had already reached. She called him the next morning. Her voice was steady again, professional again, but underneath it was something warmer than professional. I finished my own check, she said. The batches don't meet the safety target. My report is going to say so, formally, with my name on it, no matter what it costs my firm. Claire, I'm not doing this for you. There was no unkindness in it, only precision. I want to be clear about that, because it matters to me that you understand it. I'm doing this because I checked the math myself, alone, with you nowhere near it, and the math didn't change just because I might have wanted it to. I know, Ryan said, and something in his chest, tight for weeks, finally let go. That's exactly why I believe you. The corporate review meeting was set for the last Thursday in October in a glass-walled conference room on the 31st floor of Continental Harvest downtown headquarters. The CEO, the company's top lawyer, and 4 members of the executive committee were all present. Gregory sat near the head of the table, his face arranged into something carefully calm. Ryan presented first. He did not soften the numbers. He put the raw heat charts on the screen, the delay in heating, the F0 shortfall on the affected batches, laid out with the same plain precision he brought to every dataset he had ever touched. His hand, holding the remote, trembled slightly, a small human sign of nerves under an otherwise steady voice. But his voice itself did not shake, and he did not round a single number in the company's favor. The new sauce needs a retested cooking process, he said. 3 early batches do not meet the safety target for controlling botulism risk. I'm recommending we hold those batches, complete a full retest of the process for the new formula, and pull back any product from those batches that has already left the warehouse. The company's lawyer asked several sharp questions. Ryan answered each one without flinching, without extra words, and without once looking to Gregory for support he already knew wouldn't come. Then Claire presented her own findings. They matched Ryan's, number for number, reached through a completely separate method. "I want to be direct with this committee," she said, looking at the CEO instead of at Gregory. "In 12 years of doing this work, I have rarely seen an internal team catch and report a problem this clearly against this much resistance from inside the company. Dr. Voss didn't wait for an outside auditor to find this. He found it himself, and he held his ground under real pressure to let it go. That should matter to how this company treats him going forward." The CEO, a woman named Diane Kowalski, had said little through the whole meeting. She was in her early 50s, compact, in a plain gray suit, with cropped silver blonde hair and the flat, watchful look of someone who had sat through 1,000 meetings built to hide bad news and had gotten very good at waiting them out. She hadn't taken a single note. She had simply watched, her hands folded on the table, until she finally spoke. "Gregory, walk me through the resistance Dr. Voss says he ran into." Gregory's calm didn't fully break, but it thinned, visibly, the ease going out of his shoulders. I asked him to reconsider how he was reading the statistical margin. At the time, I believed the risk was manageable given the launch commitments we'd already made. "You asked your own safety reviewer to soften a shortfall on a botulism control point," Diane said, weeks before it shipped to grocery stores. It wasn't a question. Ryan expected silence. He didn't get it. "With respect, Diane, I don't think this committee has the full picture," Gregory said, his voice sharpening for the first time in the meeting. He leaned forward, both hands flat on the table. "Dr. Voss brought this finding to me weeks ago. It's been sitting there ever since, while he and Ms. Ashworth met outside any formal audit process, in a parking lot, at 11 at night, by his own account. I'd like this committee to ask what exactly was being discussed at 11 at night that couldn't wait for a scheduled review." The room went very still. Ryan felt the accusation land before he fully understood its shape, a cold clarity settling into his chest even as heat rose up the back of his neck. "Say what you mean, Gregory," Ryan said. His voice didn't rise. If anything, it dropped flat and level, the same tone he used for reading a report out loud. "Don't make the committee guess at it." Gregory didn't blink. "I'm saying Ms. Ashworth's independent audit isn't independent at all. I'm saying the two of you have a personal relationship this committee was never told about, and that relationship produced a joint finding designed to make DR. Voss looked like a whistleblower, and this company looked negligent, right around the time his own promotion was in question. I call that a conflict of interest. Some people might call it something closer to sabotage." For a moment, nobody spoke. The lawyer's pen stopped moving. Diane Kowalski's face didn't change, but her eyes moved from Gregory to Ryan and stayed there, waiting. Ryan's jaw tightened, a small, visible pressure along his cheek. But when he spoke, his voice stayed even, almost gentle, the way it always did when he was at his angriest and most sure of his ground. "I'm not going to pretend there's nothing between Dr. Ashworth and me, because that would be a lie, and I've spent weeks refusing to tell this company lies at real cost to myself. So I'll say it plainly. Yes, we've grown close. No, that has nothing to do with the F0 numbers on batch WC 2214, because I found that problem alone at my own desk before I told her anything. And the equipment records prove it, time-stamped, and this committee is welcome to pull them directly from our system. You can't bend a heat chart to flatter a feeling, Gregory. I wish it worked that way. It would have made the last few weeks a lot easier." Claire set her folder down with a quiet, deliberate motion. When she spoke, her voice carried the same composed precision she brought to every finding, without a trace of defensiveness in it. "I'll answer the accusation directly, since it was made directly. My firm has audited 11 food companies in the last 2 years. Every finding I have ever issued is traceable, repeatable, and signed under my own professional license, which I do not intend to lose over Continental Harvest launch calendar. I reran Voss's calculations myself, alone, the night after our conversation in that parking lot. A conversation that, for the record, consisted of him showing me a problem he had already found and asking whether my own read of the numbers agreed with his. It did. If Mr. Halden wants to suggest that two qualified professionals agreeing on the same physics is proof of a plot, I'd like him to explain which basic law of heat transfer he believes we conspired to break. A short, surprised laugh escaped one of the committee members before he could stop it, quickly covered by a cough. As for motive, Claire went on, her eyes steady on Gregory now. You've suggested Dr. Voss wanted to look like a whistleblower. I'd point out that whistleblowers rarely work this hard to avoid the label. He didn't go to the press. He didn't go to the FDA. He came to you, privately, more than once, and gave you every chance to fix this quietly before it ever reached this room. The only person who has turned this into a conflict of interest question is you, Mr. Halden. I gently suggest that's worth this committee's attention in its own right. Gregory opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time since Ryan had known him, he looked like a man who had reached for a door he was sure would open, and found it locked. Diane Kowalski let the silence sit for a long moment before she finally spoke, her tone impossible to read. Gregory, you just accused two people on the record of professional misconduct in front of our general counsel, with nothing to back it up. I hope, for your sake, you had more than a hunch before you said that out loud. Gregory didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence answered for him. The launch was held. The 3 affected batches were pulled back from the limited stores that already had them, at a cost the company absorbed quietly, without incident, precisely because it was caught early. The full cooking process for the new sauce was retested over the following 6 weeks, with new heating times that accounted for the thicker formula, and the product finally launched in January without a single problem, 3 months later than planned, and far safer for the wait. Gregory Halden left Continental Harvest in November. The official reason given was pursuing new opportunities. Nobody in the building believed it, and nobody said otherwise out loud. In December, Diane Kowalski offered Ryan the Director of Product Safety and Process Engineering role, not as a consolation prize, but because, as she put it during the offer, I want the person running this part of the company to be someone who holds the line when it's expensive to hold it. That turned out to be you. It wasn't close. Ryan accepted. He didn't celebrate the way people expected him to. Instead, he drove to the small coffee shop 2 blocks from the plant, where Claire was already sitting at the same shared table, a printed report in front of her, marked up in pen. You got the job, she said. It wasn't a question. She was already smiling. I got the job. He sat across from her, the way he had that first ordinary Thursday morning, before either of them knew what the other one was walking into. Then he reached into his jacket and set a single sheet of paper on the table, face down, like he was about to deal her a card. Claire raised an eyebrow. What's that? A report. You brought me a report. To celebrate. It's a short one, Ryan said. 1 page. She flipped it over. It was not, in fact, a report. It was a single hand-drawn line graph, sketched in blue pen, with an arrow pointing up and to the right. The x-axis said, weeks knowing Claire. The y-axis said, how much I like you. There was a small, neat label near the top corner. Trend holds. No signs of slowing. Claire stared at it, then at him, then back at the paper, one hand coming up to cover her mouth. Ryan, did you make a chart? I made a chart. Is this validated? It's not validated, Ryan admitted. It's not even calibrated. I drew it in the parking lot 10 minutes ago with a pen I found in my glove box. I'm fully aware this would never survive an audit. It would not, Claire said, laughing now, the kind of laugh that made her have to put the paper down before she dropped her coffee. This would not survive 5 minutes with me. I know. I brought it anyway. He rubbed the back of his neck, which was for Ryan the closest thing to visible panic. I wanted to say something, and I got nervous, and apparently when I get nervous I make graphs. It's a design flaw. I've had it my whole life. That's not a design flaw, Claire said, still grinning. That might be the most you thing that has ever happened. Claire, he took a breath. I like you. A lot. Probably an amount that would look, on paper, faintly alarming. I don't know how to say it smoother than that, because every time I practiced it in the car, it came out sounding like a lab report, and you deserve better than a lab report. Even a good one. Claire reached across the table and turned his ridiculous little graph so it was facing him too, so they could both look at it together. For the record, she said, as a professional, I am obligated to point out that a sample size of one man is not enough to draw a real conclusion. I was hoping, Ryan said, you'd be willing to help me collect more data, long term, possibly for the rest of my life. I haven't fully modeled the timeline. That's a terrible pickup line. It's the only kind I've got. Claire laughed again, warm and unguarded, and this time she didn't let go of his hand once she'd taken it. Good, she said. Because I like you too, and I was starting to worry I'd have to be the one to say it first, and I really did not want to peer review my own confession. I would have accepted it, Ryan said. Peer review makes everything stronger. Ryan saw the nervous still happening. I noticed. She squeezed his hand, and something in her voice went soft under the teasing. Keep the chart. I want it framed. It's on a napkin now, technically. I ran out of paper halfway through and finished the y-axis on a napkin. Even better, Claire said. Frame the napkin. Outside, the first hard frost of the season sat on the sidewalk, and the morning light came in low and gold through the window, catching the steam off 2 cups of coffee going slowly cold and completely ignored. The city went on with its ordinary Tuesday morning, with no idea that in a small coffee shop nearby, 2 people who trusted evidence above almost everything else had just been talked into believing something with no proof at all, and had liked it.